go ahead and start up in just a second here. So again, just to recap, we're giving examples today, right? These are not exact quotes of any product that we're giving. So you're going to make sure that if you want the specifics, you either give us a call or go on the website and we'll prepare those for you. Number two, we are recording, okay? So I am going to go ahead and kind of switch to more of a speaker format. And I'm also going to go ahead, well, before we start officially, Chris and Ashley, I just want to say welcome and thanks. Do you guys want to just unmute for a second and make sure we can hear you?
Yes. Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Chris Sarabo. I'm the East Coast Regional Sales Manager with Travel Insured and pleased to be with you.
Excellent.
And I'm Ashley Garris. I'm our account administration team here at Travel Insured, and it's a pleasure to be on this call this evening.
So we are excited about being able to do this. We started talking about doing a call on trip protection probably a good half year ago or more. And then these guys were nice enough to basically say, yes, not only are we willing to do it, but we'd like to. And we're thrilled because for many of you, you know that we have offered different trip protection over the years. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of stalling because I'm getting the right screen share. So when we started putting this together, which one are you seeing? Are you seeing my slides? Ashley, are you seeing the full screen or are you seeing my notes?
I am seeing your full screen, so we're good to go.
Perfect. And so when we started talking about this and trip protection in general, there were tons of questions that kind of came up. And with that, we said, you know what? Why don't we go ahead? We have some great people in our office that answer these questions, like Donna that's on this call, and Barbara and Natalie. But why don't we go ahead and get the real experts on and go through this? So as many of you know, Friendship Tours offers protection through a couple different companies. You have the option of taking your own protection, but today we really want to concentrate on Travel Insured International. And there's some specific reasons for that. So first off, what we're going to do in today's program is when and why to buy trip protection choices, our wonderful speakers from Travel Insured, some history and overview of that company in case you aren't 100% familiar with Travel Insured International, best bed rest, because that's important in today's COVID world. So what travel inconvenience coverage might be, worldwide protector, schedule of coverage, and questions and answers. So that's all we're going to get to today. So let's get directly in. Why buy trip protection? So one of the things that we get in the office all the time is people coming to us and saying, you know, I know while I'm on a trip that I have trip protection and there's coverage, but what about before? And so literally from the time you do your deposit and then go ahead and decide that you're going to do trip protection and you've actually signed up for that, once you've made that payment, that coverage actually starts. What do I mean by that? I mean that there's already travel protection that's you're getting while you're sitting at home. So much like a car, right? You often have car insurance, we all do, but we often don't feel like it's insured till we have the accident. Well, that's not the case. Right away, you have coverage that's there. Then during the trip, right, there's things that are there as well. The other parts of this is some ideas of why to buy it. So some of the things that we're going to cover in more depth: cancellation, medical coverage, personal belongings. Then I always love these things that you might want to consider. So these are some scenarios that are real life scenarios that you might want to ask, what if? So one that I always think of is we had a client that was on their way to the airport. They were literally almost at Bradley and they got in a car crash. And it wasn't too severe, but it was severe enough that they had to go to the hospital. And so they missed that trip. So what would happen in that scenario? We're going to talk a little bit of some of how these might work, because each one is different and the coverages are going to have different ways of dealing with them. But another one that I've had personally is I've been on flights that have been delayed and there's no more flights out, and sometimes I've even found myself sleeping at the airport. What about that? How do I protect in that scenario? Is there ways to do it? Often people will say, your immediate family member who isn't traveling gets sick or injured or passes away. What about that? Are there, what do you do to prepare? So that's some of what we want to discuss today. And before we go, I thought I'd share this with you. So Travel Insured International, why we have really decided this was a company that we wanted to help us with this trip protection comes back to a couple things. One is it was founded in 1994 by a gentleman, Peter Garris. Now, he's actually local. This company was originally founded in Glastonbury, Connecticut, for those that may already know that. It's a leading travel insurer and industry player, located in Glastonbury still to this day. It not only has its family roots that are well entrenched here in Connecticut, but it actually has a wonderful Crum and Foster that is a giant company and a player in this industry that backs it. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. And these family values still stay true. So Chris, for some of you I see on the call are actually group leaders, people that book large groups of people. You may recognize Chris. He actually was at our Travel Fest for years when he was actually with Discover Newport, and of course also the Newport Mansions, and was always so on top of his game. When we heard that he had gone to Travel International, we were super excited. Also joining Chris today is Ashley, and Ashley chose Travel Insured to stay because her family, if you recognize that Peter Garris, that's actually her grandfather. Her grandmother I knew personally. She traveled with my mother for years, but she really is a part of this great company. The culture capitalizes on an extensive knowledge of not only the industry, but the history that's led to it. And so we're really super excited to have each. Chris, do you want to just share, before we go into this next part, a little bit of your journey as you came into travel protection and kind of how that all became part of where you are today?
Yeah. Well, appreciate the warm introduction, and I'm sure some of you folks maybe we've crossed paths at the Breakers Mansion on one of your motor coach tours, or maybe at Friendship Tours Fest over the years. But yeah, I've been with the organization now about 3 years, and a lot of people ask me, how do you go from selling a destination to selling travel insurance? But no, it's truly a family here. I think a lot of the folks, like my coworker Ashley, I've worked with so many people that have been with the company since its inception in 1994. I love relationship building. I love helping people, and it's been a great journey. And I still get to carry over my relationships that I had in Newport with the Convention Visitors Bureau and with Newport, Rhode Island, and work with Brett, Amy, and so forth. And it truly is a family affair. We're still family operated today, but the beauty is that we're owned by a Fortune 500 company. So we have big business backing, and we're truly in it for the long haul.
And Ashley, I know you've had a very interesting journey, a lot of history going back, but also some of the training and things that you've done. Do you mind sharing a little bit of your background and how you came to be in the account administrator?
Yeah, so I've essentially been working at Travel Insured since I was 4 years old. That's the joke of this business, right? So I've been in the industry a very long time, and Travel Insured, when I started, I didn't get the easy route. It wasn't like I joined the company and everyone was like, oh, great, she's account administration, let her do her thing. So I started at the bottom. I started customer care. I made it my job to understand our travel insurance policies, to understand our clients, and to understand our travel agent partners that we work with, like Brett. So I made that my life goal with my business relationships to kind of build it as my journey with work. With that being said, I loved working with people. I love educating people. So I chose to go in an account administration, which is essentially our travel advisor support. And I do a lot of our company training when it comes to our travel agents, but also with their clientele. So that's my journey at Travel Insured. And I'm so happy to still be here and keep up the Garris last name and all that good stuff that comes with it.
Well, I love it. It's been really fun just to share some of these calls with you. I remember your grandmother so well, and I think today I can't think of two better people to really dig into this topic. So why don't we just kind of go right on in? There's some different types of product that we're going to talk about today. So I know this is something that a lot of people maybe know or don't know. Chris, do you want to, or Ashley, do you guys want to talk a little bit about what this is and why it might actually play into what people are thinking about?
Sure. So over the last couple of years, we've had to pivot just like most businesses, right? Once the pandemic first started. Now, I'm sure you're all kind of wondering, oh, what's going to happen if I test positive for COVID, or, how's the insurance company handling that? So it's good for you all to know, with one of our most commonly sold plans that we're going to talk about as we progress, that's called the Worldwide Trip Protector Plan. Now, with that, has an optional upgrade called our optional travel inconvenience bed rest benefit. So this is our specific quarantine coverage. If in the event that you test positive in destination, this is going to provide up to $4,000 worth of quarantine coverage specifically for meals and accommodations. And along with that positive test, we would just require a doctor's note just to verify the sickness indeed. But this is certainly a game changer. It's only $13 to add this particular benefit onto your travel protection policy. And I think it's imperative for you to do so.
So this one I personally had to take advantage of. Many of you know, while I was in Prague, I did test positive for COVID. And, before I had gone, was fully aware that this was a possibility. And I had purchased exactly what Chris is talking about. And it did, help me quite a bit, because all of the my hotel stay and my food, and again, each policy has specifics, so I'm not getting into the details, but it was a game changer for me. So it's definitely something that is in a new world that is important to talk about. I know Ashley and Chris, you guys already have talked a little bit about some of the different programs. Why don't you guys go ahead and just explain some of, when somebody's looking at trip protection, what are some of the things that they should be thinking of, and what are some of the options? And maybe you could just go right into anywhere that you would like to. And when you want me to change slides, I'm happy to do it. Just say change slide.
Yeah, sounds good, Brad. So travel insurance is not what everyone typically thinks travel insurance is. When you think travel insurance, you may be thinking like, oh, if I have to cancel my trip or something along those lines. When we offer travel insurance, we like offering a travel insurance experience, meaning you're getting coverage from start to finish. As Brett mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, you have things for like trip cancellation, you have things for like medical, you have things for baggage during your trip. But when it comes down to the nitty gritty of insurance, insurance is so much more than just, as I mentioned, trip cancellation. When you go to utilize a travel insurance protection policy like the one on our screen here, you are provided a plan that has about over 30 covered reasons for trip cancellation or trip interruption. And for those that may not know, trip interruption is the same as trip cancellation. However, it's when you're on your trip. So God forbid a family member back home becomes sick and you need to interrupt your trip and go home early. God forbid you're taking a tour and you're walking and you trip over something and you have to go to the emergency room or be medically evacuated. These are all things that fall under protection policies. Now, speaking of medical, our policy is primary with the medical and baggage. So if you are utilizing things like Medicare, Medicare may not cover you outside the continental US, or if you have a Medicare supplement, it may provide coverage. However, it may have high deductibles or more restrictions. So with that being said, our travel insurance is primary when it comes to medical, so you don't even have to bother with your primary medical provider. As Chris mentioned too, we also do have quarantine benefits that you can add on to your plan, but there's actually quarantine benefits built into your plan. So if you're wondering, what happens to me if I test positive for COVID-19 when I'm on my trip and I don't have that optional upgrade, am I out of coverage? The answer is no. If you do test positive on your trip, if you don't have that optional upgrade, you also have other benefits built into the plan. Now, on the concept of COVID, you may be wondering, what happens if I test positive and I have to cancel my trip? I know myself as a traveler, that was my number one concern when I went to Hawaii in December. I was like, what happens if I test before I go and I'm positive and I have to cancel my trip? Well, the beautiful thing with travel insurance, especially with us, is that COVID-19 is treated like any other medical condition. That means if you were to test positive prior to your trip, as long as you have a physician just confirming your tests, you can file for cancellation and get the cost of your money back. Now, with cancellation as well, we have about 30 covered reasons for cancellation with the plan. Those are things like sickness, injury, or death of yourself, a traveling companion, or a family member, strike, terrorism, and so on. Sometimes in life, things happen that are outside of those covered reasons. Like, for example, unfortunately, what's happening in Ukraine right now. Ukraine is a situation that may not necessarily be covered with the standard plan because it's war. With that being said, our policy, especially this worldwide trip protector, does allow you to enhance to something called cancel for any reason. And folks, you heard it right. It is cancel for any reason. It is whatever reason of your choosing that you can utilize to cancel your trip. With the standard policy, if it wasn't a covered reason, there would be no reimbursement. But if you opt in to cancel for any reason, you're still having some reimbursement issued back to you if you follow the criteria. Now, I say follow the criteria because there are guidelines. It is insurance, right? So if you ever have more questions about that, we can always dive in deeper. But just know there are options out there if it falls outside your scope of the standard reasons that may fall under a policy.
And Ashley, an example, if they're looking at the screen, I know it's very hard to see that because it's small little writing, but you would see that cancel for any reason, kind of 75%. So that gives you an idea there that's there. And this was something that when we looked at improving the coverages that we were offering people was something that we'd been asked a ton about. So it was really important that we look at, the bed rest, that we look at what they call CFAR, cancel for any reason. So I thought that was a really nice enhancement. What I love, Ashley, is you guys, while a lot of insurance, I feel like have gone away and said, oh, we're going to cover less. That's not really been your case. You guys have actually looked at, like, I know even weather, like there are times where if it rains, you have some things that are interesting. So do you want to talk a little bit more about some of those pieces that maybe that you have?
Yeah, so we actually have an optional upgrade we added on recently when we relaunched our products. So as Brett's talking about, if it rains, it can be an inconvenience, right? So we do have an optional upgrade that is called the travel inconvenience, which you can add to our policy. With that being said, if something happens where you have a rainy vacation, a tarmac delay, things that are a super inconvenience to you, there may be applicable coverage with that optional buy-up. But speaking of weather, let's cycle back in. Let's say you're about to board your flight and there's a rainstorm at Bradley and they shut the airport down, or you're at Bradley and there's a beautiful snowstorm, right? We're in New England. Snow happens a lot. Those are also things that can be applicable for like trip delay and trip cancellation. So the great thing is, I don't want to say like insurance covers you for essentially whatever what if scenario, but the way that insurance is now working, especially when we revamped our policies, we understand the needs and requirements of the everyday traveler. And what may happen to you on your trip is somehow more than likely going to be something we can find reflective in the policy. Like with Brett's situation and, when he was on his trip about being quarantined, we looked at every possible benefit we could to make sure that he had the most coverage. Our clients that are canceling for sickness, we try to see what is happening to make sure that we can give them the best coverage possible. So we will evaluate the situation, and as long as it falls within the scope of our policies, we can definitely offer you a top-notch insurance policy.
So I know this next slide is who do you call?
Yeah, so in every other training I've done, I usually make the joke like, who do you call? Ghostbusters? But no, here at Travel Insured, if you ever need any questions answered, if you do have one of our policies and you have a claim, you always want to reach out to our customer care department. Our customer care department is stacked with over 30 professionals, and they can help answer any policy questions. So if you are interested in the insurance and you have a really specific question about a scenario that may happen that you're wondering if the insurance would be applicable, you can contact them. If you're like me and you may not want to talk to people before 10 a.m., you can always utilize our live chat feature, which is just typing to an individual online. Or if you're self-service and you would like to start a claim, like if you have a policy and then need to start a claim, you can do this all right here on our website. And they can also be reached by telephone number, which is to the far right of our screen, or you can always reach them by email.
And so these would all be if something has happened or information, but even while they're on the trip, if something arises, there's some help there too, correct?
Right. Chris, do you want to tackle this?
Yeah, sure. So as you see on the right-hand side of your screen, that last phone number on the bottom right under call, you'll see two phone numbers for what we call our 24/7 emergency travel assistance services company. So we're contracted with an organization called Active Care Management. So consider this your 24/7 concierge service. So if you're in destination, you fall and slip on something and you hurt yourself, you need medical attention. Let's say you damage your eyeglasses or you need an emergency cash advance or you lose your prescription drugs. These are just a few applicable examples as to when you might utilize the concierge service. So it's truly around the clock care. And this company will assist you with your travel arrangements, getting you to a hospital of your choice, and they will pull out all the stops for you until you arrive home safe and sound. So this concierge service comes standard with all of our plans. So it's helpful to make note of those phone numbers. Of course, your first instinct is to call your trusted travel advisor, right? When things don't go as planned, which you can certainly do, but on those long haul trips and you need immediate assistance, this is a great example of why travel insurance is so necessary in these times.
And I have to be honest, this is something that's really important to keep in mind. When I was in my situation, I really wasn't aware of this. And I kind of knew all about doing the claim and all that. And had I reached out to this number with help for my change of ticket and things like that, I might have had different outcomes, which would have been easier. So it's really important as a traveler today that in the ever-changing world that we kind of make sure we're taking advantage of everything that's out there for us. So I feel really strong that that one's an important one, just to know that this is part of this policy. I know, Ashley, you talked about primary versus secondary. So that also is a really big difference with this particular policy. And I can't stress why that's so important. One, just for the simplicity of claim, right, Ashley? It's a little bit easier when you don't have to get denied by something or put everything in and see what is covered. This is primary, meaning it actually takes the forefront. Is that a good way of explaining it?
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, primary, think about that as your plus, right? Your person of contact. So if you are primary with coverage, that means we are the ones that you're submitting with first. So primary takes such stressors off you if you have a claim.
And so this, I know we often talk about when we're leaving the country, obviously Medicare and things like that don't cover, but I think Ashley, if I heard you correctly, instead of having those deductibles, because this is primary, you're not then trying to figure out that part of it.
Exactly. Yeah. If, you know, with primary, even if you're, so if I'm staying in the US, I know for a fact my health insurance is going to cover me, right? But if I had travel insurance policy for my domestic trip, I don't even have to worry about my primary insurance. I can just submit everything to travel insured because with them being quote unquote primary for my trip, everything I can submit through them instead of going through my primary health insurance that I normally have. So that's the benefit of having a primary provider.
And so the claim process, you're literally able to do it online. You can make a phone call, you can do that chat. And then when for my example, and I'm sure this is probably similar to many, but I then got all the information that they required for me to basically document. So I knew what I needed to kind of submit. And is that kind of similar how people can kind of expect to be handled?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Brett, we love you, but there was no special treatment there, my friend. Um, how we handled your claim is exactly how we'll handle an insurance claim. You know, the documentation that we need, we'll tell them exactly what we need. We send it out. Once we have that documentation, they can submit it back to us. And then the best thing too is having you as their advisor. You know, if there is a hiccup with their claim or if it is taking too long, that's when you, the advisor, can work with Chris and I, and we can see what's happening. So we have a beautiful trifecta relationship here, right? Of how you're helping your clients as the advisor, and then we're helping you with our partnership.
Absolutely. And that's always the key. So let's talk a little bit, if you guys don't mind, about how to get a quote or how to get the coverage. So we have two ways at Friendship Tours that are pretty simple. One is they have an amazing website. So you can see the website here, travelinsured.com, or you can call us. And I know Donna is on, and I think right now I can't see the screen of everybody, but I know like Barbara and Heidi, Natalie, these guys in our office are all really good at going ahead and helping you to get a quote, but you can do that yourself. You can actually do this process. Is there anything you guys want to talk about the process of getting started with getting the coverage?
Yeah, I would say the first thing that you want to keep in mind, and you might wonder, well, how do you calculate premium price, right? So there's a few basic questions that we're going to ask you. We'll ask for your state of residence, your total non-refundable trip cost, your initial trip deposit date, which is the date for which you put monies down towards your trip. And we'll also ask for the destination, the departure, and the return date. I would, it's always great to work with a travel advisor, like those folks, obviously, that were mentioned, because they have the ability to send you an emailed quote. They can customize it a little bit if you wanted the bed rest benefit or you wanted cancel for any reason. That can be added on to your policy for you, but it's truly automated. You have the ability to purchase over the phone if you want to speak to a representative. And you also have the ability to purchase it right online through an emailed quote. Just enter in your credit card information and purchase a plan. And when you do make that purchase, you also get the copy of benefits. So it's full disclosure, what is covered in the plan, and our plan documents as well. So there's certainly no shortage of description. I wouldn't recommend reading through 60 plus pages of plan documents unless you're getting ready for a nap. But in all seriousness, all the bells and whistles of the policy are listed there in the coverage.
And that's really important. I know it's a lot of documentation, but it is really important to kind of look through. If you have specific questions, you can certainly, they have experts that can go through that, but it is, I know it's a lot, but it's important that you look through. So I know the other part people always ask is how much does it cost? And for this, again, there are a lot of variables that go in. I know, Chris, even what state somebody lives in, right? Isn't that a determining factor?
Yes, it is. So insurance nowadays is regulated at each individual state level. So someone who's getting a quote in Pennsylvania may have slightly different options versus one who's getting a quote in Connecticut. So that's why we do ask for the state of residence, because the rules and regulations might vary slightly per state.
And another one that actually determines is, it's funny, but the date of the trip, and why that actually comes into play sometimes is when your birthday is, right? Maybe when you're getting the insurance, you're at one age, but the trip goes and you actually have had a birthday, congratulations, but that also affects it, correct?
Correct. And it's also, sometimes Ashley and I work with clients who are taking a long haul trip, or maybe they're traveling for 30, 60, 90 days. So typically speaking, if your trip duration is 30 days or less, then you're going to have a consistent quote. If your trip is more than 30 days, where I don't think it's necessarily applicable in this group here, you're going to have one set price. But yeah, it does vary. So you do want to be cognizant of those birthdays as well.
And the trip price obviously is a factor. And then the coverage selected. So one of the things I love is there are so many different products that they've thought about and really put together for different scenarios, but that also can be a bit confusing at times. So, we try to keep this as simple as we can, but the trip coverage that you selected. So if you were to add on that cancel for any reason, that's obviously going to adjust a little bit of the pricing as well. And so I thought what we might do is look at some real life situations, because I think people are always wondering like, okay, what does this mean? So one of the trips that we have up and coming, this is a higher priced trip, is of course our Viking River Cruise, Paris and the Swiss Alps. This is round trip transportation. It's your air. It has literally 2 nights in Zurich. It has 2 nights in Paris. 7-night cruise in there. So all kinds of things in there. And so, Chris, I thought maybe we just would look at what some of these scenarios might be. Now, again, this is not exact. Unless you get an actual quote, the numbers then would be defined by that. And Ashley, do you want to give your disclaimer here?
Sure. So with all the quotes on the screen, everyone, please understand that your quotes are subject to change because it is based on where you live, your date of birth, and the cost of your trip. So these are just like a beautiful little snippet of what the insurance may end up costing.
I want to give an example of what it might look like. So in these scenarios, we looked at, somebody who was 51, 66, and 74. Now, again, depending on when their birth dates to the dates of these trips, that could be slightly an effect, but this was assuming that these were the cases. Chris, worldwide trip protector with bed rest is the first one in there. And so one of the reasons we looked at that was here you're going to Europe, right? And there is always that chance that maybe something happens. COVID exists in the world. So we added in the bed rest. In the second example, I know we've now done bed rest and CFAR. Do you want to just talk about what Worldwide Edge and what these different things might actually be?
Sure. Yeah, I love this slide here, and it makes me want to go on this trip myself. But look, you see, you take a look at the first one. The reason why it's on top is because the Worldwide Trip Protector Edge is our premier plan. I mean, when you talk about having all the bells and whistles, you're essentially driving a Maserati in travel insurance form. But with that said, you've got primary medical coverage, like we've talked about. You have $100,000 worth of primary medical coverage. That is of the highest in the industry that you will find anywhere. If in the rare instance, and believe me, it does happen, we do get crazy scenarios almost on a daily basis, but we do have medical evacuation coverage at $1 million worth of coverage. I can tell you that, the highest claim that we've paid, and this goes back to 2019, somebody had a heart attack on a cruise ship. We paid, when it was all said and done, in the neighborhood of $230,000 for that one claim. Will you need a full $1 million worth of coverage? Of course not, but it is always good to have a buffer and know that you have more than enough to get you home safe and sound. So the Worldwide Trip Protector plan is going to be a tremendous option for you. The bed rest benefit, like we talked about, if you get quarantined in destination, we know, unfortunately, even if you're vaccinated, you can still contract COVID. So it's good to have that added layer of protection
Yes.
there, so that again, you have incurred meals and accommodations. This coverage will kick in and assist you again up until you arrive home safe and sound, and then cancel for any reason. It's unfortunate what's going on in Europe right now, but these are things that we all have to deal with. And for folks that actually do want to get out there and take their trips, they want added peace of mind. So if you have the fear of COVID or the fear of the war going on, fear isn't necessarily a covered reason. That might be a cancel for any reason type of situation. Or you have a pet, and maybe your pet is sick and you're not sure if you need to cancel your trip because of a situation that may arise. So any of those non-covered reasons are great for why cancel for any reason would be so important to utilize.
So Chris, if I had a cancel for any reason plan, it's exactly that. I could wake up and just say, you know what, it's raining and I'm not going, but it has to be done in a certain time period, correct?
Yes, great point. So there is a time sensitive, this is a time sensitive benefit where this must be purchased within 21 days of your initial trip deposit. So if I made my deposit on my trip today, I would have 21 days to purchase this policy. And then on the back end, to actually cancel and trigger this benefit, you must cancel your trip 48 hours or more before your scheduled departure date. Inside of 48 hours, we want to make sure that it's more of a covered reason.
So I can't just say that day I'm not going, right? It's 48
Correct.
hours. The other number you used, I think, is really important, which was 21 days. And with the worldwide protector, a lot of times people go, pre-existing conditions, are those covered or not covered? And do you mind talking a little bit about that 21 days comes into play with that as well, right?
Yeah, Ashley, do you want to elaborate on pre-existing conditions?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have the availability of covering pre-existing medical conditions under our policies. Now, when you hear pre-existing, you're probably thinking any condition that may have happened in the past. But with the insurance company, a pre-existing medical condition is any change in your medical history 2 months prior to purchasing the insurance. If you have something that is a concern of that, you'll want to make sure you're booking your travel insurance within 21 days of the initial trip deposit with that worldwide trip protector. And you just want to make sure you're medically able to travel at the day you're booking the insurance. So unfortunately, if you're in a hospital bed, you call Brett, you're like, hey, I need travel insurance today. It's probably not going to happen. But yeah, let's definitely, if you're concerned with cancel for any reason or pre-existing medical conditions, let's get you booked within 21 days from your first payment.
Kind of like you can't have the car accident and then get the insurance, right?
Exactly. The house can't be burning down and then you take out the travel insurance, right?
And one of the other parts of this that's so important is that you can take insurance anytime up to when you travel, but your coverage doesn't begin until you actually have taken it. Number one, I know that sounds somewhat foolish, but it's something that we get all the time. But if you had done your deposit and it was past 21 days, that pre-existing condition would not be available. Is that correct? If I had paid back a year ago and then 2 weeks before the trip, I take my insurance in this scenario.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. So some of you may know about other policies that might have had one type for pre-existing and one for non. That's not the case here. As long as you are 21 days after doing your deposit, that's already, as long as your house isn't burning, you're already right in there with the same price. So I always like to point that out. This is another example. So here, of course, is a transatlantic cruise in September that I know some of the people on this call are actually booked on. If you were trying to figure out, are there some insurance here? So you might want the trip protection, the worldwide trip protector. But Chris, what if somebody had already taken an insurance or they had a policy that came over because they had a trip canceled, but now they're going, you know what? I kind of think this bed rest might make sense. Is that something that they could then add on?
Yes, yeah, you can add that on. The beauty is that the bed rest benefit can be added on as late as the day prior to departure. Typically, we want to try to get it at least 48 hours from departure date. But if you've got travelers who last minute they're like, oh, I want travel insurance, then you can add on that bed rest benefit. And again, folks, it's only $13 to add that on to the worldwide trip protector plan. So it's definitely a great option.
And definitely these are things, and in fact, if you haven't booked this trip, there are some spaces still, September 3 through September 18, and it's one of my favorite itineraries. It's a great ship. You're going into Denmark, Norway, Iceland, Greenland, Boston, and tons of exciting things, fully escorted. Now, what about a domestic trip? Something that's here in the States. Here's a trip August 16th to the 21st that has included air, and it's Yellowstone and the Grand Tetons. So Chris, maybe give some scenarios of what they should be thinking about a trip like this, what protection you would suggest.
Right. So a plan that we haven't talked about too much is, as you can see on the right-hand side of your screen towards the bottom, is our worldwide trip protector edge. So that's a fantastic plan. It's more of what we call middle of the road type coverage. It doesn't have, all of the bells and whistles of the worldwide trip protector plan, but as you can see, it's at a more economical price point, and the medical coverage is going to be a little bit less. There's some optional upgrades where if you wanted to increase your medical coverage, you could do so. But this is great for those domestic trips because we know that we've got coverage if you're on Medicare in the States, and maybe you don't necessarily need $100,000 and $1 million on, medical and medical evac. But as we know, we should have some form of travel protection when we're traveling in general. So this is a good economic option for you.
Absolutely. So travel protection is definitely, there's lots of nuances to it, but you guys were nice enough, the people on the call, to submit some questions ahead of time. So if you don't mind, Chris, Ashley, I'll have you guys, whoever wants to take them. The first one that we have up here was, what is the criteria to cover cancellation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with our various policies, we do have anywhere from 24 to 30 covered reasons for cancellation. So I guess the criteria to cover cancellation would be that you're canceling for one of those covered reasons, or if you have to cancel for any reason, you are utilizing that. And the best way to know the covered reasons for cancellation would be when you receive a quote, whether it's from our website or you get an email quote sent to you. With every quote, there's a little tab that says details, and that will list all the covered reasons for cancellation with that specific plan.
Excellent. And then we can just move right into the next one. How to avoid coverage overlaps or gaps?
Yeah, I could take that one. So I think that's where, doing your homework comes into place, right? And doing some plan comparisons, maybe talking with your travel advisor and saying, hey, this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for really high-end medical coverage, or maybe I've got a little bit of anxiety about world events and I just want to make sure that I'm adequately covered. So basing the coverage amounts on the trip that you're taking. If it's an international trip, you should be having $100,000 worth of medical coverage and $1 million worth of medical evacuation. So we know that sometimes when we're underinsured, that's where the issues start to arise. So taking that bed rest benefit, because we know when folks are getting quarantined back a year or two ago, that quarantine period was 14 days. It's a little bit shorter now. And I know Brett had quite a lengthy one.
Depends on the country. Yep.
Depends on the country, but if you've only got, say $300 or $500, that's not going to cover you for 2 weeks. So that's why we want to be cognizant of things like the bed rest benefit that, wow, it's going to cover me for $4,000 for meals and accommodations. That should be enough to get you home.
As an example, I think mine after 2 weeks, so 14 days for food and lodging was about little under 2,500. So obviously it was well within that area. So it gives kind of a real number to it. I think we've talked a lot about cancel for any reason, sometimes referred to as CFAR. Is there any last things that we want to say there, or I think we've explained it quite a bit?
I just as an example, if a claim is filed and you're claiming $1,000, and that's the money that you're, out of pocket on, we're going to pay you $750, just as an example. So
That'd be 75%.
Right, 75%. We are going to ask for things like proof of payment, proof of refund, so that we're truly giving you 75% of the remaining non-refundable trip cost. But it's definitely a great benefit, and just be cognizant of those time-sensitive windows as well.
And so, of course, I know we've talked about Ukraine, and of course, our hearts go out to everybody over there. This is something, war is not a typically covered in the policies. So what if, so the question here was, what about, that as an example? And I don't think you can answer what if it spreads, because I know you're a pretty smart guy, the two, both Chris and Ashley, but you probably don't know the future. But can you kind of address that question?
Yeah, absolutely. So, with things like war, right? We'll take Ukraine. Now, if the things in Ukraine start to get worse, God forbid, and I don't want to say necessarily spreads, but if it causes a concern for Europe, right, where you may not necessarily want to go overseas, you may have more concerning factors, I would definitely invest in the cancel for any reason, because war is an exclusion and we want to make sure that there's some coverage. So if you do have a concern of things, how they may not necessarily spread, but how things may evolve, definitely utilize the cancel for any reason under the policies.
Great. How do I get more information or answers to specific questions?
So that's going to be utilizing that customer care department. So we saw, I think it was 1 or 2 slides back, but if you have any questions, if you go to travelinsured.com, we have a little telephone at the top of the screen. You can reach out to the customer care department directly, or if you're looking for quotes or to purchase, definitely utilize your travel advisor as well.
Excellent. And again, that's up on the screen and it gives you some of those, and we can help you get the information as well. Let's see, what do we have? And I will keep going. Why shouldn't I just use the cruise lines insurance? So one of the things is we have had a outside company like yourselves for a long time. And can you give an example of why that might be something they would consider?
Yeah, sure. I think this is a great question. It kind of ties in with my example from one of the highest claims that we paid. I can tell you wholeheartedly that any given cruise line is not going to offer $100,000 worth of primary medical coverage. They're not going to have $1 million worth of medical evacuation coverage. They're not going to have 30 reasons for trip cancellation and trip interruption as well. It's nothing against them, but we have a specific underwriter in Eatontown, New Jersey. So it's truly travel insurance without any gaps. Your typical cruise line policy is going to be anywhere from $25,000 to $30,000, maybe 35 or 40 with some of the luxury ships. But you're going to probably tap out at, I would say, the median of 30,000 in medical. And when you're overseas and you have a medical situation, and again, these aren't things that happen every day, but that's why we get insurance to for that rainy day, so to speak. But you want to be doing those comparisons, apples to apples. We get the question, well, why am I going to buy your insurance if it's a little bit more expensive? Because it has all the benefits that are necessary if a claim experience takes place. So just knowing that we have truly superior coverage is really going to be beneficial for you. And Brett and the team, you guys have that relationship with us so that if a claim is filed, we can help expedite it. We can get you, answers to the questions that you have. When you're dealing with the cruise line company with their insurance, you don't know who underwrites their plans. So you might be going down a different path with them versus one with us where you have that concrete relationship.
Excellent. And then I think we kind of covered pre-existing conditions. Was there any last thing we wanted to talk about, or do you think we've covered that pretty well?
I think we're good there. I can't stress it enough. Like, if you have the ability to do so, make sure that you're buying the travel protection within 21 days. That's going to be best case scenario. Like Brett can't stress it enough. The coverage is going to start right when you buy the trip. So it's going to protect you while you're still home. So let's make sure that we're getting the most bang for our buck with that insurance policy.
And so, of course, one of the things that came up during COVID was vouchers or future cruise credits. I know I can't see Donna, but I'm sure she's like, oh, going into a little like, what, she's so tired of them. But if people have future cruise credits, are those covered?
So yeah, we can absolutely provide coverage for those. So you would insure the amount you originally paid for the cruise that resulted in that voucher or that credit, and we can insure that under your trip costs. The only stipulation with that is if you are utilizing what we like to call an FTC, so future travel credit, what would end up happening is there may not be coverage for pre-existing medical conditions, and we may not be able to offer cancel for any reason, because that does date payment-wise back to the original trip. So with that being said, we can cover it, but there may be stipulations of some benefits that may not be applicable.
So again, that 21 days, it would be well outside of what that original payment period was. And that's the reason for that, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And also keep in mind, folks, when you're insuring it, you're insuring the monetary value. We know that some of these credits, they might give you 125%. So you're getting that additional 25%. Unfortunately, that wasn't an out-of-pocket payment. So you would want to insure that 100%, just as a clarification piece.
So this would be actual monies that were done. A lot of the
Right.
cruise lines did offer extra for having people take the credits. But in this scenario, that doesn't have to do with the value of what we're insuring. Doesn't my credit card cover these things? So I love that question. People ask all the time, I have Amex Platinum or I have whatever card and it has coverage. Do either of you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a legitimate question because it's advertised that you have free travel insurance, but it kind of goes along with the same things. I could tell you that they're not going to be providing 30 reasons for trip cancellation coverage. There's going to be some benefits that aren't going to be as strong. One, which is really the most important, is going to be your medical coverage. Again, I can't stress it enough. I know I keep talking about it, but that's what you really want to weigh in your insurance policy. What kind of medical coverage do we have? COVID coverage under travel delay or the bed rest benefit. Those credit card companies aren't going to be offering that. And if you have to file a claim, how can you wholeheartedly feel confident in knowing that it's going to get paid? We just don't know. I've heard of some horror stories where you can't get a hold of these companies. And again, there are some that are better than others, right? Like Chase Sapphire or Amex, maybe they have a little bit more enhanced coverage. But again, Brett, Heidi, and the rest of the team, you guys don't have those relationships with those credit card companies, right? And that will help assist along the way. So
some of this is just being aware, right, Chris? Like
being aware
of being an educated consumer and knowing like, what am I getting versus this? So
and when you're paying those big ticket items, right? You're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. You don't want to take a gamble and just assume that you have blanket coverage with your credit card. I know if I was spending a lot of money on my trip, I want to know black and white, like the coverages And if I file a claim and it's legitimate, it's going to get paid. So.
And Ashley, I know you did a great job of kind of answering this one before, but is COVID covered and how is it handled?
Yeah, absolutely, Brett. So COVID-19 is treated like any other medical condition, meaning if you were to test positive prior to your trip and you have a physician confirming the tests, then you can file for cancellation. That can trickle over to trip interruption. If you test before you board your Viking River cruise and you test positive, that can be another applicable reason for trip interruption. There's quarantine coverage, and there's even coverage for hospitalizations and medical evacuations. So essentially, quite a few tiers of our policy COVID-19 can be applicable, and that is handled in those senses.
Excellent. Well, we're almost at our hour, and I really appreciate everybody taking the time to learn a little bit more about travel insurance, Travel International. I think Chris and Ashley, you guys have done an amazing job of explaining that what is kind of a complicated topic. And I just want to again say thank you. We do have a wonderful Zoom happening March 31st at 5 o'clock. It's going to be the American Queen Steamboat Company and a specific itinerary you'll learn a little bit more about that Donna actually experienced this past fall. And so we are going to share a little bit about that experience and company and how that all works. So I see there was one question that was in the chat. Were you unmuted? Heidi's going to unmute and ask it.
Chris, I know you've answered most of the questions in the chat window. For those who have not looked at the chat window, there's some good information in there. But I did see there was one, someone asked about the yearly coverage for travel.
Yeah, sure. I can elaborate on that. So we do have an annual policy for those of you who are repeat travelers. Maybe you're taking 3, 4, 5 trips a year in a normal non-pandemic type of year, but we do have what's called our annual multi-trip protector plan. For children 0 to 17, it's a $64 rate for the entire year. And then for adults 18 to 80, the rate is only $94 for the year. With that being said, as long as your trip is 100 miles or more away from your state of residence, that can be included and insured, and you will be covered for 364 days. That $94 is strictly post-departure benefits, meaning coverage when you start your trip. However, if you want to add things like cancel for any reason, trip cancellation coverage, the bed rest benefit, those items can be added on a per trip basis. So just keep that in mind. Again, it's worth doing the price comparisons and knowing that, okay, if I add cancel for any reason on a couple of trips on the annual plan, I might be outpricing myself versus going on one of our individual retail policies. So just be aware of that. But again, you're going out to visit your kids, or you're doing a getaway out to a national park, or maybe you're just going down to DC for the weekend and you want coverage while you're on your trip. It's a great policy, and again, it has great value at only $94 for the year.
And that's, again, we couldn't cover everything. That's actually a really interesting product, which is a yearly product that they do offer. So again, if people have questions, you can certainly contact us at Friendship Tours. I always like to say, our website, Friendship Tours, is www.friendshiptours.net. Very important, .net. And our emails are just simply our first names at friendshiptours.net. So Brett at friendshiptours.net, BRETT. And if you send those in, we can always get you to the right places. And we have these wonderful relationships that are here to help us with things that come up. So again, we're now right at just 6 o'clock. Thanks so much for everybody's time. And we'd love to hear from people if there are other information that you would like to see on a future Zoom. Let us know. We really love having experts like this join us because they know the answers and they know at least where to get all the answers. So thanks so much again. Any last Oh, who has a raised hand? Okay. Um,
There was an applaud.
oh, it was
Sorry.
an applaud. Very nice. Well, thanks again. At this point, we're officially done with our Zoom. I'm going to stop the recording. If there's any question that somebody had, you can certainly ask it. If you want to say something to us, you could do that as well.